welcome back to the second hour, Free for All Friday on Focal Point, 888-589-8840. Number to call, 888-589-8840. Let you talk about anything that's on your mind, and of course, on a lot of people's mind in the wake of this election. Let's grab a couple of sound bites. We have President Obama giving a speech today, and he made it very clear that he is insistent on raising taxes. He's going to do it. He called on Congress today to reduce the deficit, quote, in a balanced and responsive way. And again, if you hear the word balanced, that is a euphemism for tax increases. So anybody uses the word balanced. I don't care if they're a Republican. I don't care if they're a Democrat. If they say they are going to take care of the deficit in a balanced way, they're talking about raising taxes. That's what that means. So don't let anybody fool you. It's like you hear comprehensive immigration reform. That's a code word for amnesty. You hear balanced approach to dealing with the deficit. That is nothing more than tax increases. Now, there's been a lot of talk about and let's start with clip one here. There's been a lot of talk on the part of Democrats that they got some kind of a mandate. This is a very narrow margin of victory. I don't know what the percentage is, 51-49, something like that. You know, Obama's one of the very few presidents in American history to get reelected with a smaller vote total than he got the first time around. 9 million people fewer voted for Barack Obama this time than voted for him in 2008. The problem was 2 million fewer people voted for Romney than voted for McCain in 2008. Romney's base simply did not turn out, whether it's because it had something to do with his religion, whether it had something to do with the fact that he was moderate, but for whatever reason, 62 million people turned out for Bush in 2004, 60 million for McCain in 2008, and down to 58 million for Romney in 2012. So the high watermark for turnout was George Bush, 2004. So the problem obviously is getting the base to turn out. If Romney's base, the conservative base, had turned out, then Governor Romney would have won this election. But you hear the Democrats talking about some kind of mandate. Now, this is ridiculous. Here's David Axelrod talking about this assertion on the part of some Democrats that President Obama, by this 51-49, remember, we talked about how razor thin this margin was for about 400,000, actually 183,000 flips. If strategically placed voters had flipped their vote from Obama to Romney, Romney would be the president today, president-elect. That's all it took. Is about, 327,000 vote differential in 5 key states would have swung this election to Romney. That's razor thin, ladies and gentlemen. That's part of what Neil Maman was saying yesterday. Hey, I think the church can find 200 or 327,000 votes. And actually, as I pointed out, you just need 183,000 to switch their votes because it's a net 2-vote swing. You take one away from Obama, give it to Romney. That's a two, and the counting system, that's a 2-vote swing. So you do that 183,000 people, and Governor Romney is the president-elect. Now, that means to me that there's no mandate here. This is razor thin. And David Axelrod, surprisingly, tends to agree. Let's listen.
It did sound like everyone's idea of compromise was getting the other side to come over to them. Even with your big win, how are things going to be any different if you listen to the way the political leaders talked yesterday? What is going to change?
Well, Richard, you know, as you say that, I was thinking about Richard Murdoch in Indiana, who famously said compromises when they agree with us.
Right.
And I note that he's not on his way to the United States Senate, and I don't think that's a way forward for the country. So, you know, everyone's going to have to come to the table in the spirit of getting something done. But on this issue of particularly the fiscal cliff, you know, one thing, you know, presidents always say, well, I had a mandate. That's a foolish word, and it's generally untrue. But the president did campaign all over this country. He talked about it in debates. He talked about it in speeches on the need for balanced deficit reduction that included some new revenues. And he was reelected by, you know, in a significant way. So I think that hopefully people will read those results and read them as a vote for cooperation, and will come to the table. And obviously everyone's going to have to come with an open mind to these discussions.
So that is David Axelrod. Use the word mandate, that's a foolish word, and it is generally untrue. But President Obama out there basically today saying, look, the people elected me to raise taxes on the wealthy. By the way, David Petraeus has resigned as the head of the CIA. And I got to tell you, I think that had, I don't know what the official news reports are going to say, but I think it had a lot to do with Libya. I think initially the effort was to lay this off on the CIA. General Petraeus is a good soldier. He's not the type that's going to be inclined to leave soldiers on the field of battle. And he made it very clear that the order to stand down did not come from the CIA. Now, he didn't say where it came from, because that would leave you with the State Department or would leave you with President Obama, who gave the order to stand down and not give any help to these guys. But General Petraeus is saying, look, that did not come from us. So I think this thing has been such a catastrophe. And I think, frankly, he's humiliated to be identified with this. It embarrasses him that people would think he would have any part of such an inept catastrophe, such a debacle. And so I think General Petraeus washing his hands of the whole thing, trying to get as far away from the Libya mess as he possibly can. Let's go back to the phones. Let's go to Patrick in Raleigh, North Carolina. Patrick, welcome to Focal Point with Brian Fisher. What's on your mind?
Hey, Brian, just thanks for taking my call.
You bet.
I just had a couple of comments, and then I'll hang up. But first one, I just wanted to share what one of our pastors had taught about this Wednesday about God's will. And of course, he was relating it to the election and the results. And so he gave the example of just because we do it and we say it's God's will doesn't mean it's his perfect will. It's his accepting will, as in, Brian, I can hit you in your face and say that's God's will, but of course we know that's not going to be God's will.
Yeah, it's not what God wants. Yeah.
Absolutely. And so, and I relate that, and my second comment is also about just as soon as the election was over, pretty much the ears of all the people that voted, they're going to be closed up. They're not going to listen to anything else because they got what they wanted. And so I was listening to a couple of news reports on how many people in the area of where there's supposed to be so many smart people, as in Harvard and MIT, in the Boston area, about they did not know who their senators were, how many senators in the country, who Nancy Pelosi was, who was Harry Reid. They didn't even know that Paul Ryan was the VP candidate. And my point with that is, it's just amazing how they get all their knowledge from, whether it's Hollywood because their favorite actor can say it, and they will listen with a full heart and full open eyes. But when it comes from the truth, they tend to, oh, really, or something like that. And that's all I want to say, and thank you for taking my call.
All right, Patrick, listen, I appreciate that. And, the reality is, we've seen the surveys that talk about how much more informed conservatives are than liberals. In fact, I had a story in the stack. I finally dumped it because I never got to it. But it was a story in the stack about how much more informed about public policy issues and civic matters conservatives are than liberals. And there's a reason for this. To be a conservative, you have to use your brain. To be a liberal, you do not. All you have to do to be a liberal or a progressive is just feel. It's feelings, it's the intensity of your feelings that validate whatever your position is. For conservatives, it's logic, it's history, it's rationale. That's what validates our positions. Focal Point, AFR Talk.